There's no doubt we're living in a changing world. Technology moving faster than you can imagine. In the medical field, there are great strides being made in all aspects of care. But there's one question you need to ask. When it comes to my medical care, what's the most important card I carry? Is it insurance? Is it a credit card? Or is it MIDEO? That's right, MIDEO.
This is probably the most important card in their pocket. More important than their insurance card, more important than their driver's license. It's the card that will tell the physician exactly how this patient wants to be treated. And you are talking about it in a state we really understand the situation.
What is MIDEO? Well, we have the doctor on hand to explain it for you.
MIDEO stands for My Informed Decision on Video. And that's a component here of documents and medical orders that is lacking. Your informed decision. Your informed decision means you know the risks and benefits, that you can accurately make a decision. And when you have MIDEO done, it's done in a way where we talk to you, we inform you, we educate you, we make sure you know the components of the care that we're talking about, because it's important for you to make those decisions, not me as the physician. It's important for you to be involved in those decisions. Now, believe me, if you don't want to be involved in those decisions, other people will make those decisions for you, and it won't be the decision you want, I promise you. But if you want to know what MIDEO is specifically, MIDEO is a communication tool. It's a communication tool. It functions as an advance directive, and it can function as a medical order because it's a prescription, no different than a prescription for you getting a blood pressure medication to treat your blood pressure. And essentially what MIDEO does is it's a great way to document a communication process that occurs between me and you as a patient and physician, and then bring it to that next physician or medical provider in your care and make sure that they actually understand it and provide the care and treatment that you want and is aligned with what your decision is rather than someone else's. And today there's nothing else that can do that. There's no paper document today that can align that decision like that. And it's really important because today, and the research has shown this today, that we can do this to the utmost accuracy to make sure that you're safe as you navigate through this very treacherous healthcare system. Because the healthcare system isn't safe. If you look at it, we report that the number 2 or number 3 cause of death in the United States is a medical error. And if you take into account all the medical errors that happen with respect to living will documents and these pulse documents and so on, you'll find that we would probably jump to number 2 and potentially number 1, which makes the healthcare system the most unsafe place for you to be.
Dr. Fernando Merarchi has spent a career in emergency medicine. He's cared for the sickest of the sick and has helped patients in their most dire need. He knows what it means to be dealing with this issue. And before we get into more detail specifically about MIDEO and how you can get yours, let's talk a little bit about why this doctor feels so passionate about making MIDEO a reality for all patients.
And a lot of what I've done with advanced directives has been from a personal experience. In what I have done in emergency medicine is pioneer many different processes to help develop better care systems for people, heart attack, stroke, trauma, and just get involved in it. But specifically with advanced directives, it came about when I essentially was involved in taking care of a patient who was a young 55-year-old lady, a mom, who essentially was suffering from a heart attack. And when she was having that heart attack, she essentially went into a very fatal heart rhythm. And that fatal heart rhythm can be fixed if you act quickly. And when I was trying to decide what to do for her, I had a nurse who was trying to do her job, who essentially was flashing a living will in front of me saying, don't shock her, she's a DNR. And I was lucky. I mean, I was paralyzed in one respect, but I was lucky in another, in that there was a cardiologist there who happened to know what to do, pushed me aside, took the old-fashioned paddles we use that you see on TV, shocked her chest, and she woke up. They treated her heart attack and she went home. And that kind of left me frazzled, because if it were me, she'd be dead today. Her kids would not have a mom today. But in the end, she survived, not due to any acts of mine, to the acts of someone else who happened to be there. And then later on in life, when I was a resident in training in emergency medicine, Allegheny General in Pittsburgh, I was taking care of a 65-year-old male who essentially had end-stage prostate cancer and who was dying, and he did want to die. And I unfortunately thought I was making a mistake again by treating him, or by not treating him. So I treated him and saved his life, just to find out I made a mistake. So I knew at that point in time that this was a broken process. It's a broken process. It's not the safest process in the world because too many people have different understandings of what documents mean. And quite frankly, when I see a document in front of a patient, I'm really not doing anything more than guessing. And if anyone tells you otherwise, that you're expressing your wishes in paper, it's not happening. You're really dependent upon someone else making a guess, which we call an interpretation. And oftentimes that's a misinterpretation. And people either get life-saving treatment that they didn't want or don't receive the life-saving treatment that they did want and potentially die.
The number one cause of death today is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer. Number 3, you might be a little surprised because there's no special day, no special month, no association to handle it. But what that cause is are medical mistakes. And nobody knows more personally how a medical mistake can affect the family forever than Sandra Furrier from Wakefield, Mass.
My mom passed in April 2015, and shortly thereafter, he started to not feel well, and he got dehydrated, and things just got out of control, I guess.
Yeah, but loved life. I mean, you seem like a family that loved life.
He loved life. He was one of those people that had this sense of humor. I mean, he could have people cracking up and be completely stone-faced. He's just like his dad, I've been told, like that. Well-liked by everyone, had a lot of friends. We as his children adored him. Sweet, kind, friendly, tall with the most beautiful blue eyes. And I miss him terribly. Well, he had, basic medical issues. He had a hip replaced at, one point. This main thing, when he got sick this time, like I said, my mom had died in April 2015, and he hadn't been eating and drinking enough, so he got dehydrated. So we took him to the ER, and they treated him, released him, but then he kept just saying, I don't feel well, I don't feel well, and after a few weeks, we brought him back to the hospital, where they told me he had a hospital-acquired infection. So then he ended up there for another 2 weeks with this infection, and in the process he was injured. His bladder was punctured when they were placing a catheter. So that gave him a little bit of a longer stay than he wanted, and after fighting the infection and the injury, he was just really very weak. So they told me he needed to go to rehab. So we put him in rehab. And then while he was there, he seemed to be doing well off and on, depending on the medications they were giving him. And then one day, his Foley catheter got pulled out by accident. It wasn't, on purpose. And he had to go back to the emergency room. And from that point on, he just did not get the care that he should have gotten. A nurse came in and asked us to fill out a MOST form. I did not know what that was. And she explained, she goes, well, if anything happens, not that I'm saying it's going to, but if anything does happen, we would like to know what your wishes are. What would you like us to do for treatment? So we went through the MOST form, and they asked all the questions, do you want to be intubated if need be? Do you want CPR if need be? And we checked yes to all of those things. He wasn't extremely ill or anything, so we just checked them all off. And then they told me that this particular form, which is bright pink, it's just bright, obnoxious pink, goes into his folder, and anywhere he goes, this most form will travel with him. So we thought, okay, great. So in the nurse's report, it says that my father was trying to get out of bed at the rehab, and he had been medicated with pain medication. So a nurse saw him getting up, and she ran over and pushed him back in the bed. And when she was swinging his legs up in the bed, then she noticed blood. Well, that's where his Foley got pulled out, which is extremely excruciatingly painful, I would think.
Yeah.
So this was at about 2:30 in the afternoon, and finally at 4:30 they called me and said that he needed to be transported back to the hospital so it could be fixed. I said, okay, fine, do what you have to. We'll go from there. And he got to the hospital, and basically he didn't get any care at all that he needed. He had already been bleeding for about 3.5 hours by the time he got to the emergency room. My father was a patient that took warfarin, a blood thinner, Coumadin, and he just laid there bleeding. And at one point I was told they tried to replace the catheter and they couldn't get it, so that a urologist would have to be called, and nobody called a neurologist until 11 p.m. So at that point my father had been bleeding 9-10 hours on Coumadin, and they never gave him anything to help with the bleeding. They didn't give him any iron, they didn't give him a vitamin K shot or anything to counteract the Coumadin. And finally at 2:30 in the morning, the urologist showed up, and in the process of them trying to replace my father's catheter, they kept giving him a medication called Ativan, which is a benzodiazepine, which is a medication my father should not have had. It's contraindicated for someone in my father's position. And in the process of that, now he had been bleeding for 12.5 hours now. He had lost half of his blood volume. They did nothing. They wanted to transfuse, they never did it. They never called me to ask me for the permission. I was his proxy and his power of attorney. And in the process of doing this, they were trying to get a blood gas, and my father went into respiratory arrest. I believe at that point they discovered my father had a MOLST, and they resuscitated him. And I walked into the medical ICU, and I saw my father laying in that bed with tubes down his throat and up his nose and wires and machines and everywhere. I remember seeing my father in the bed, and then the next thing I remember, I was sitting in a chair with a nurse shoving a glass of water in my face. So I must have gone weak in the knees. And I could not believe what I was looking at. I'm like, this man had a pulled out catheter. And now he's on life support fighting for his life. A nurse practitioner came up to speak to me, and she was supposed to be there at 3 o'clock. She didn't show up until 3:22. And she said, can I speak to you? I said, sure. So we went down the hall to this little room, and it was just her and I in this room. And I was very upset at this point because I couldn't believe how my father was being treated. And we had been spoken to very rudely by other members of the staff at that point. And I was really upset. So she pulls me in this room and she tells me, I would like to speak to you about your father's condition. I said, okay, because your father is very, very ill. I said, all right. I said, but according to his chart, he's getting better. And she rolled her eyes at me. And at that point, that angered me even more. She said, well, he is still very ill.
So they were trying to make these end-of-life decisions for him?
Yes. Yes. So she and I were walking down the hall back to my dad's room. And she said, well, if anything happens, I'm not going to do anything. And I looked at her and I said, I don't agree. And we walked a little bit further down, and my friend stepped out of the room and saw how upset I was, because now, I'm angry on top of being upset from being treated so rudely. And she said it to my friend again. If anything happens to him, we're not going to do anything. And my friend spoke up and said, she just told you she doesn't agree with that, and there's a MOLST in effect.
Did a doctor come in at any point on this?
Never saw a doctor. I just couldn't believe she said it. So I walked in, I said, Daddy, and he said, what? I said, have they spoken to you about any kind of treatments, medicines, anything they, can or want to do for you? He said, nope, I just get my regular medicines. When can I go home?
And he's coherent and talking and...
Coherent and talking, but yet they're saying that he was not. When the nurse practitioner left me and my friend at my father's room, she went right over to the nurse's station to the computer and put DNR on my father's computer chart. Now, not once during our conversation did she say DNR or the words do not resuscitate never crossed her lips. I was never asked for one. I didn't offer one. Why didn't you do anything? If you were with my father when he passed, why didn't you do anything to help him? She said, because of the DNR. And I went mental. What DNR? What are you talking about? I'm his proxy, I'm his power of attorney. I did not authorize a DNR. Oh, I'm like, why didn't anybody call me when he started failing? I don't know. I said, so you're telling me at 7 o'clock my father started failing? Yes. And nobody called me? No, apparently not, is what she said to me. And I said, and you stood there with him and you did nothing. She's like, we did nothing. I'm like, why not? Because of the DNR. I'm like, who did it? When was this done? Who did it? And she started to panic a little. She's like, hold on, I'll go look. I was put on hold. When she came back, she told me the name of the person who did it, and it had been done that afternoon. And I was just shocked and horrified, and then I was screaming into the phone. I'm like, she had no right to do that. I said, do you have a signed hard copy of a DNR in my father's chart? I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Did you even look at my father's chart? No, we go by what's in the computer. And I'm like, so you're telling me that you had no idea my father had a most form? No, she says to me. All we go by is what's in the computer. And in the computer it says, do not resuscitate.
So what began as basic medical care ultimately ended in death because of miscommunication. Not long after his passing, the family received this letter from an administrator. On behalf of Hallmark Health System, I again express my sincere apology for the misunderstanding surrounding your wishes regarding your father's resuscitation status. In addition, please accept my heartfelt condolences for your loss. The sad reality is that Sandra Furrier's story is not uncommon. Try to remember that the third leading cause of death in the United States are medical mistakes. But this doesn't have to be your story. There is an answer. That answer is MIDEO.
That we don't know what we're doing with living will documents across the country. You know, you may have an understanding of what you want from that document, but the medical provider, who by the way is a medical stranger to you, right? Because you don't really know that medical provider today. You know, your primary care doctor used to be your medical provider and advocate, but when you come into a hospital, you know nobody. You know, you don't typically know the nurses, you don't know the emergency department physicians, you don't know the trauma surgeons, and you might be traveling. You might be in Florida snowbirding or something. So you know nobody, and then all of a sudden, somebody who you don't know at a critical time in your life has to look at a piece of paper and decide what's right for you. So when you think about it, there's no real training in the medical profession that's adequate enough to make sure that we're competent, to make sure that we actually understand what to do with these documents when you come in critically ill. But I will tell you that there is a push to let people die naturally. And that's okay for the right population, because we really don't want to expend expensive resources on patients if they don't want them and it's not going to be a benefit. But you don't want people reflexively just thinking they're not to provide care because you have a document. You want people to be trained and know what to do with your medical care, and then come to your agents or someone in your family to say, hey, this person has X, Y, and Z medical conditions. We do or don't think they're going to survive from it. What would you like us to do? That's the ideal way on how this should work. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that today, unless you have something like MIDEO, which is a real safety tool to come in, make sure your wishes are communicated accurately, and then they can come back to your family and say, look, this is what we got. This is what their wishes are. And by the way, here, we can show you what their wishes are so you're not making a mistake yourself, because that's a guilt-ridden decision for a family member. You know, to decide whether or not a mom or dad lives, or a grandparent, or even a child lives or die. That is a very guilt-ridden decision on the part of patients. And if you can show them now what a patient, that loved one, actually wanted, it's much more consoling to that family member.
Jim Fiorenzo is not just a MIDEO card holder. He's also been in hospital administration for many, many years, and even served as CEO of a Level 2 trauma center. He knows firsthand how important it is to carry a MIDEO card.
The MIDEO card, for me, is very important. I want people who know what they're doing and make the decisions that I want in my life going forward. If I travel, I want people to know everywhere what my decisions are. So there's no question that the MIDEO card answers that question for me. I saw the trauma that this caused patients, families, and caregivers every single day. There's no question that, in my mind, the MIDEO card answers that. That's why I got a MIDEO card, so that I could protect myself and my family in the future. Decisions need to be made quickly. A living will can't be accessed quickly. You need something that can, and a MIDEO card can do that for you.
We'll start today with some exciting news that comes to us thanks to a partnership between Highmark and a firm called MIDEO, which you've heard about before, and we'll tell you a little bit more about them. But thanks to this partnership, we're going to be able to provide free of charge personal recorded and validated resuscitation choices and a validated medical ID card to every one of our 173 police officers and 137 firefighters that work for the city. He is an emergency medical physician who many of you know as the medical director of UPMC Hammond. He also has a medical practice called Advanced Care Planning. He founded the Institute on Healthcare Directives, which we'll refer to as IHCD going forward, which creates the unique technology called MIDEO. And again, that stands for My Informed Decision on Video.
Many of you don't know this, but there's a national patient safety crisis out there as far as medical errors. Medical errors are the #3 cause of death in the United States. One of the biggest errors that happens that goes unrecorded is how people with living will documents get treated. And two things happen, and it's usually not what the patient wants. People either get overtreated and treated against their wish, or they get undertreated and potentially die or die. So we've created MIDEO, which is My Informed Decision on Video, which is a really cool, unique ID card that actually is able to have you speak for yourself at a time you're no longer able to, and can actually guide your family. Now, I recently just got back from Denver, Colorado for what's called a CTAC meeting and a Pulse Technology Conference. And all the buzz at these meetings are how there's so many errors nationally happening and how nobody's paying attention to it. Well, we have a piece of technology here that can get combined with medical evaluations, and Highmark saw the value of this and brought it right to police and fire, and we're going to look to other payers and other groups to help us make this an employee benefit to everyone in Erie County to make sure that they can be protected, that you and your family can be protected. The technology on a national platform has the ability to correct so many errors and keep people safe.
The product is incredible. The timing is right, and everything that Dr. Meraki and all of us know about the product, it has a national play or a national opportunity to really address a problem. You either create products, you fix products that don't work, or you create something new. And the buzz is real, and the time is now.
On behalf of Highmark, I just want to state, we've been partners with the city for many years, and we look forward to continuing this partnership. And when we were approached to help provide this grant for the men and women of the police and fire department, we jumped at the opportunity.
We don't think there's anything more important than a patient being able to make an informed decision. Nor do we think there's anything more important than the physician being able to treat that patient and treat their wishes. And the employee care program at the City of Erie is the Hammond Health Foundation's gift to the city to allow these employees to really go in and really understand the decisions that they need to make and the decisions that should not be made for them, that they need to have a stake in that. I think the most challenging part of healthcare is when you do see those families and they are so confused and they're stressed, and when they're stressed, it's just then even harder to make that right decision. What I've also seen many times are families that are not on the same page with a decision for a loved one, and that makes it even more difficult. That just adds an element of stress to the situation. So being, part of healthcare for my entire career clearly is an administrative side. We really understand and empathize with those families. We empathize with those physicians, again, in trying to make that right decision for that patient. But I've seen many, many times where families really struggle with what are the right decisions for my loved one in that time where decisions need to be made.
Hello, I'm Mike Gallagher. I have been narrating this presentation for the group at MIDEO because of their efforts. Now, in most cases, you see the narrator's name come up at the end, basically in a credit. But the truth is, MIDEO is personal for me. In fact, I often say that if there were a poster child for the MIDEO card, it could be me. In my life, I worked as a broadcaster for almost 3 decades, but I also had 2 major traumas in my life. One of them actually occurred on national TV in front of millions of viewers. But ultimately it ended up with 47 different types of procedures and surgeries on my face, head, eyes, back, and neck. Luckily, I'm doing okay today, but now I suffer with chronic kidney disease, stage 3, on the verge of stage 4. In fact, also in my life, my ex-wife, who was a great, great woman, died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. And during her final days, my adult children, my in-laws, it was a very trying and stressing time that had we had MIDEO in place at those moments, so much stress would have been alleviated. So yes, I am telling you the story to try and become or make you more informed, but this is very personal for me. And the nice part about MIDEO for me is with all the jaw trauma and surgeries I've had, my jaw can lock up and it doesn't open well. So in an emergency situation, I am a difficult airway to start. Well, MIDEO doesn't only give my advanced directives for end-of-life care, it also informs my caregivers and providers with information that they have instantly about my situation.
If you go to MIDEOcard.com, that's all you need to do. MIDEOcard.com, and you'll actually come to our website where you can schedule appointments with us at the Institute on Healthcare Directives. You'll find information about MIDEO. You'll hear real case examples on that website of people who have gone through the healthcare system and have experienced firsthand how they were inappropriately given a do not resuscitate order or inappropriately given a pulse document. We have to make sure that you get you get directed to the right sites so that we can make sure that you schedule with the right people to go through this process with us. And again, that site is MIDEOcard.com.
Dr. Fernando Merarchi and the team at the Institute on Healthcare Directives are leading the way with how end-of-life issues can be addressed, providing care and compassion to the families involved and peace of mind for their patients. In fact, their work is so pioneering that publications like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and many, many more across the country are taking note that this is the answer that the medical field has been looking for.
Lives are being lost. People are making life and death decisions they don't have the right to make. And if we had this on video of my father saying, whatever you got to do it, keep me alive, then there would have been no question.